Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start with an issue that's been touched upon, and that is the gap in intelligence coverage between our foreign-facing agencies and domestic agencies. I think uh, Director Wray referred to it as a blind spot. How do we deal with this? Director Haynes, this is the SolarWinds is a perfect example of it was Russian motivated, Russian instituted. They did the work, but it was implemented through servers and infrastructure within the United States. So they sort of went through this blind spot, if you will. What are your suggestions of how we deal with this, bearing in mind the obligations of the Fourth Amendment and the protection of privacy of American citizens?
Thank you, Senator King. I mean, I think it's an excellent question, and it's one obviously that we're struggling with in a series of areas. In our discussion of DVE, in our discussion of cyber, in areas like malign influence and so on. And I think from at least my perspective, we are working through each of these issues very carefully to ensure that we're complying with the law, that we're within our authorities, that we're doing what we should be doing, and taking into account privacy and civil liberties and the questions that are so critical to any time that we are collecting intelligence along these lines and trying to combine, in effect, domestic and intelligence sources. And in that space, trying to then also provide analysis that gives people the full picture. But I think as General Nakasone noted, there are some real challenges that we're facing in this area. And
let me ask a specific follow-up, perhaps to General Nakasone. If you see activity of this kind in your work overseas, are you allowed to tip the FBI and say, we think this is happening, you should follow up?
Certainly we are allowed to do that. We do that quite frequently, regularly with Director Wray's folks, and they do a very good job. Senator, if I can just lay this out just a bit, because I think it's important to understand the whole spectrum of it. So it does begin overseas, understanding what our adversaries are doing outside the United States. To Director Wray's point, in the United States, it is the public-private partnership. We need to be able to understand that when adversaries come into the United States and use our infrastructure, whether or not it's servers or cloud providers, that there is coverage on that. It's also this idea that we understand what an intrusion may have taken place. So this idea of being able to understand the data that may be lost and be shared is really important. And then the last point is that we need obviously the public and the private industry to have the most resilience possible. And so there is a complete responsibility there, but I would offer.
Well, I've got limited time, Director, so let me follow up on a different question, but I think this is something that bears a lot of discussion, and I hope you all will share with us your thinking of whether we need to change authorities or how we fill in this blind spot, maintaining our protection of privacy in our country. General Nakasone, 4 or 5 years ago, I asked one of your predecessors a simple question. Do our adversaries fear our response in cyberspace? Are they deterred to the point of changing their calculus as to whether or not to launch a cyber intrusion or an attack against us? I want to ask you the same question. Is there an adequate deterrent, or is this something we still need to establish more clearly as a matter of policy?
So, Senator, I'm not sure in terms of whether or not our adversaries, feel that or necessary. But here's what I know that our adversaries understand that's different today than it was several years ago. That we are not going to be standing by the sidelines, not being involved in terms of what's going on with the cyberspace and cybersecurity. Over the past several years, whether or not it's been defending our elections or being able to provide quicker attribution, this is our focus, and this has been the focus of the agency and the IC and across our government.
Thank you, and I know that I'm out of time. Mr. Burns, Director Burns, one question for the record, please. If you could provide an estimate of climate refugees over the next decade or 15 years or so, I think that's going to be a very significant national security challenge. How many refugees does your agency estimate will be on the move because of the inhospitable climate in their region? That's something you can give me for the record. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Blunt.